Hello, everyone. Decided to do a late response tonight to a video I've been wanting to respond to for a little while now, but seven things that theists say. I think the title should be called Seven Things That Some Theists Will Say, not that theists say, because that seems to imply all theists, or generally speaking, these are theist arguments and the best arguments they have. And I think that is, if that is the purpose behind it, then that's just dishonest and
Yeah, it's pretty
disingenuous. And you can,
disingenuous.
yeah, and you can steal man, which is in logic is basically a term where you don't straw man, but literally take the atheist argument, make it better, and then refute it. And you can actually, if this video would have taken actual apologetic arguments and then gave their refutations to it, then that would be something worth more taking seriously. But this video by Mr. Atheist and 6 others, I think, was just taking things theists shouldn't say and making this seem like the Christian faith is built upon these arguments or things
Right.
that theists say. Which I don't know if that is the purpose. I'm not going to say that's the motive or whatnot, because that's something I can't show to be true or false. But based on how they represent the arguments and the name of the title, it seems to imply that. But what I like to do is just respond to the claim and refutation, whether it's true or false, independent of people's motives, because no matter what, motives don't determine the truth. But since we're on things theists say, invoking theism, your next video is going to be on 5 things theists should stop arguing. So if you want go
Right,
over,
yeah.
go over that, what you're basically going to cover in that.
Right. So
Get into the
my
response.
first I made a video in the past, one of my first videos called Top 5 Arguments Atheists Should Stop Using. And now I'm making a top 5 arguments specifically for Christians because I'm not simply a theist, I'm a Christian, but top 5 arguments Christians should stop using. Not in the same attitude as the atheist one, but this one I actually want to educate my fellow Christians uh, to stop abandon these certain arguments for better ones. So some of them are, look around you, evolution is just a theory. You don't know that God doesn't exist, things like that, that don't really need to be used when there's better arguments out there. So it's more of an educational video helping Christians, but it's also kind of clickbaity at the same time. But that's kind of the whole purpose of it.
Yeah, I think what was the one you just said there? It's in this video. Oh, you can't prove that God doesn't exist. I agree. Christians shouldn't use that argument because it is just an argument from it's just falsely shifting the burden of proof, because it's
Right.
saying atheists just have burden of proof. The truth is we both do, because I would argue both have philosophical frameworks that can be both atheistic and theistic.
Right.
Theistic Logos asks, when will his video be out?
Well, it depends if I wanna work on it at all. Probably not. It's a pretty short video. The script took me like 10 minutes to write. So instead of a couple days for the other one. So it'll be pretty easy to edit. So shortly, if I get to it.
Yeah, I give you 2 months.
Well, hey, if I apply.
Well, if you apply the B theory of time, perhaps it's already done, but
Right. It's just sequential at this point.
yeah. We're just at the one point in the timeline, but let's go ahead and start this response of 7 things theists say apparently. Okay, is my screen sharing? Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Let's go ahead, see if the sound works.
Yeah, my headphones aren't plugged in. Usually I have to unplug them. Well, I don't even have headphones because the white ones always break on me. I can't figure out how to use Bluetooth. But let me go ahead and play this.
Welcome back to Dear Mr. Atheist. I once again have a 7 things video for you. We're going to skip the intro and jump right into it. This time it's 7 things theists love to say to atheists.
Now, when he says 7 things theists love to say to atheists, it really does seem to imply some motive or just a broad generalization of theist. Now, I could somewhat agree that, generally speaking, when apologetics lacks in the church, generally speaking, you could have arguments like these, but my point is that these aren't the best arguments theists give, and to imply that they are, I don't know if this video implies that, but rather they're just responding to these claims that they find to be bad arguments.
Yeah. What's funny is he says that theists love to say to atheists, like, we're just waiting and hoping for this moment that we can, use, of course, to him, they'd be bad arguments, but we're just kind of sitting around, we're waiting to just use these bad arguments towards them, that these are just things we love to say. You can already see his attitude, and you talked about earlier, his motive in this video. So I want to see what we all love to say, that we just can't wait to say to atheists.
Well, I mean, I've already seen the video a bunch of times, and so have you, so we already know what they're going to say.
I totally forgot, but let's
yeah.
see.
But he's up to 156,000 subscribers, which at this point, when atheists typically get up that high, they don't care about research because they don't need to, because people like Aaron Raw and so on, it doesn't matter what they say, they have fanboys, and when you get the popularity, truth almost, love of wisdom becomes impractical and pragmatically useless at some points. But I'm not going to accuse that of Mr. Atheist, but I definitely think of that for people like Aaron Raw and or TJ Kurt, the Amazing Atheist. Definitely. But enough of, I guess, idle speculation, but
Number 1, you should believe in God just in case.
I'm just going to let the whole thing play out, because
of course, we all know about the basic problems with this statement, most commonly labeled Pascal's wager. As has probably been pointed out a billion times, it ignores the dangers of other religions, expects you to essentially feign belief, and fails to take into account the likelihood or even plausibility of God's existence. The more I hear this argument, the more I recognize the sheer gall it takes for Christians to make it, especially in light of the...
Now, Christians to make it, real quick, I know I said I was going to let the whole thing play, but again, they keep using Christians, plural, theists, plural, and I think their wording in a categorical syllogism, plural would seem it can imply some or all, so I think they should use some, so they specify, but...
it's just too general at this point.
Yeah, I guess that's my own pickiness, but
Third point. See, literally anybody in the world can walk up to you at any time and propose a danger to you.
Now, anyone in the world, that seems to imply generalization again.
One person might tell you you need a magic stone to protect you from dragons. Another might tell you you need a tinfoil hat to keep aliens out of your mind. And on and on and on. The options are limitless, so you don't and simply can't respond to every threat a person can put into words. That would be madness, and you simply couldn't function that way. You need some kind of intelligent filter to help you decide which propositions are at all plausible, and thus worth even a moment's consideration, and which are just a waste of time. We all recognize how this is the case in almost every scenario. So for Christians to say you should bypass this filter for their claim just in case is nonsense. They're expecting you to react differently to the threat of hell than you would to any other stupid nonsense threat for one simple reason. They've never stepped back far enough from their religion to notice that from the outside, their unproven craziness looks just like everybody else's.
Yeah, Prophet Vazal definitely implies generalization here, so I'm definitely convinced of that with his language.
Unproven craziness. Thus, this argument not only fails to gain
unproven
traction,
craziness,
but gives us a glimpse into why far too many of them are unprepared to interact with anybody outside their religion.
Do you want to start?
Wait. Sorry, the ending of that. The ending of that is really interesting. I wonder what they are, who their target audience is here. Is this the philosophically well-versed?
Points out.
What?
Yes, they probably mean Christians.
Well, I mean, he said that. He said at the end, he says no wonder they are not equipped to have conversations outside their own religion. But I'm wondering, like, who are they talking about? Because the philosophically well-versed Christians, like us and as apologists, that's not an issue for us. So I wonder what they mean. But besides that, this is just one complete straw man. Even the first one here, when they say you should believe in God just in case.
Pascal's wager.
I find it funny that he
accurate of it.
Right. I find it funny that the point is you should believe in God just in case. And then he goes on and talks about Pascal's wager and tries to debunk it, which is interesting because Pascal's wager is not the same as believe in God just in case. And so I'm like, it's more of an equivocation here, that he's saying that believing in God just in case is equal to Pascal's wager. And I've heard professional philosophers discuss Pascal's wager, and this is just an awful straw man. So this is just a complete mess.
Yeah, I would have to pull out my old notes from my modern philosophy class because we have read the Pensées. Pascal's wager is not how Christians would represent it typically. So I grant them the point that, yeah, Christians will say a lot of the time, hey, you should believe just in case. And this is why I don't use Pascal's wager. I agree. I would, let me steal man here. The atheist could say, well, okay, let's assume epistemologically the Christian God exists. Now we should come down to, is there pragmatic worth for, submitting to Christ and so on. I would say that's not how the relationship part works.
Right.
But, pragmatically speaking, then depending on your view of hell versus heaven, then I would think the question would become more relevant, and they could attack that than this claim. But that I grant them the point that, yeah, I used to argue this when I first started.
I did too.
And so on, freshman year of high school. But that's fine. I don't. You guys can have a Pascal's wager because I don't use it.
Well, I think just real quick, I think a good illustration of a simple illustration of Pascal's wager is that
Well, the original doesn't involve hell. You lose everything or you lose nothing. The lose nothing is literally once you're dead, you're dead, in the simple words of the Pensées and so on. Or you win everything, which would be having eternal life and so on. So there's not even threat of hellfire or threatening itself. So that is a straw man they are purporting here of Pascal, if they want to say this is Pascal's original argument. Now, if a theist misrepresents Pascal's original argument and they're responding to that, then that's fine. But if they're saying this is Pascal's original argument in the Pensées, then they need to read up.
Yeah, and I mean, all it is it's not simply just a danger. It's for example, an analogy or illustration would be that you're walking and you see in the distance that there's this gated off pond, and you see a figure that could be a small child floating in the pond with face down, or it could be a doll, but you don't know. You don't know if it's a doll that just got thrown in there, or if it's an actual child. Now, when Pascal's wager is illustrated correctly, you would say, what would you put your bets in? Should you just keep walking and hope that it's just simply a doll, or could this be an actual human being drowning? You would put your bets that it's a human being drowning, and know that, well, if it's the actual human being drowning, then I saved a life. But if it wasn't, then I didn't waste any time. My motives were correct. That's Pascal's wager, which is this could be a child drowning in a pond face down, or it could just be a doll. You lose nothing if it's simply a doll, but you lose a lot if it's simply a human being. If it's a human being and you walk past it, that's an easy illustration of what we mean when we're talking about believing the give or takes when you believe in God, or the trade-offs or whatnot. I mean, you can get into way more than that, but that's just a simple illustration that I think is helpful.
Well, Peter Singer, if we want to talk about atheists and so on with the analogy, I'm not saying all atheists or all leftists, but someone proposed this new document with abortion and so on. And some do want to have the law where you can decide up to 6 months whether you want to keep a baby. And if they threw their baby, let's say, in the river, then some would say, and this isn't to the audience of this video or the people in this video, but rather addressing those who are okay with the mother wanting to not have a baby up to 6 months, after making that choice and so on. But just a little side thing there that people were messed up. But
yeah.
and if this video was monetized, YouTube may take it down. I'm not saying they would, but seeing how they deplatformed some anti-abortion videos and so on, that's sort of a thing. But let's go ahead and continue.
Yes. Thus, this argument not only fails to gain traction, but gives us a glimpse into why far too many of them are unprepared to interact with anybody outside their religion.
Yeah, this is just a stupid claim here. The fact that we are responding to a video, it means we're interacting with people outside of religion. And if you want theists to actually watch this video, then you're saying they're interacting with people outside their religion. So, minus the fact that there's a thing such as Christian apologetics dealing with claims against the Christian faith.
Yeah. But, they'll just talk about us in terms of apologists. That's how they say it, like those apologists.
Well, to be fair, they don't say apologists, but these YouTube atheists, a lot of the time, they want to just say apologists use the same arguments as atheists and so on, or use the same arguments like Pascal's wager and so on.
Number 2, atheists have no basis for their morality.
Okay, so before we go into this one, I think this woman here literally just explains. You see the genetic fallacy, I think, that plays out, and just the description, not the prescription of morality. And notice how there's no subjective or objective morality. Atheists can have a basis for subjective morality. No apologist or philosopher would disagree with that. Whether it's objective or not is the question, and I think we're seeing that play out here.
Morality is the set of principles we use to establish what is right and wrong, or good and bad. But where does it actually come from? Some may say God, but in truth, it comes from the three N words: nature, nurture, and negative consequences. Okay, there is a C word in it too. Nature. Humans are social animals who evolved to thrive on cooperation. The better you work as a team, the easier your group survives. And
yeah, just to point out, you could still have theistic evolution. So, unless you want to say, argue for an atheist view of evolution, then you would be purporting something beyond a lack of belief and a naturalistic, materialistic worldview that works on naturalistic laws with no intelligence guiding them and so on, which would be a burden of proof at this point and would literally state God does not exist. The proposition God does not exist is true, and God exists is false, basically. But sidetrack from there.
The more offsprings you will have. Over the generation, this cooperation has left its traces. For example, we have an innate urge to not harm each other. People born without this innate urge are often known to us as sociopaths or even psychopaths. Nurture, although many...
I do want to say, the word psychopath and sociopath, unless you want to say it's just a description of something that goes against normativity, which would still presuppose something objective. But that still presupposes there's something wrong with these people, and they're obviously disabled because they're lacking moral consciousness. And a lot of the time they want to say, well, there are people like that, therefore morality is subjective, and you can't use God as the explanation for objective morality because there is no such thing as objective morality. Just the fact that there are people that we want to say are not have problems that they obviously can't control most of the time themselves. I'll point to people like David Wood where you can't actually have an influence. But yeah, besides that, I just think the fact that we have these terms of psychopaths and sociopaths almost presupposes objective morality. But again, the woman here is really vague and doesn't... It seems like she wants to say morality is objective, but it's really hard to say if she's saying it's subjective or objective. And I don't know if they know those distinctions or if they just want to avoid using objective morality.
In taking morality for granted, our social surroundings have to train us to consider certain things good or bad. The same way it had to train us to tie our...
Well, it almost seems circular at this point. Train us to know things are good and bad, but then she wants to explain it by social conditioning and so on. That how we know things are good and bad is from this, but yet she just presupposes, seem like that something is good and bad because we're taught that way. So that seems circular itself.
Choose and not to hit little sister when she stole our teddy. Love is something. negative consequences. Even if we may disagree with many rules of our society, we still tend to follow them to avoid trouble. For example, even though we think that the speed limit is completely stupid, we drive to the speed limit.
Now, just to challenge, now if they are grounded, objective morality and negative consequences is their standard, you could say. You know, you have the typical dichotomy. If terrorists had your wife or family, and if you don't, let's say, show up in an airport or something, they have your family hostage. They want you to commit some serious crime or murder or whatever, and if you don't do it, they're going to die. If you do the right thing, there are negative consequences. So would that determine whether something's good or bad? Because it seems like to determine something is good, there can't be negative consequences or something like that. Maybe I'm missing the point, but
this is a common problem, which is she's talking in non-moral terms. Like the speed limit example is not a good example comparing to morality. Like when, like you can, like for example, all she's saying is, it's good for you to do what you want with your to not get a ticket. It's good for you to follow the speed limit, but that has nothing to do with morality at all. It's like saying
this is like Frank Turks. Did she say that example already, or is this something you're just referencing that's already in the video that we haven't gone over yet?
No, I'm talking about just her negative consequences position, which is she's talking and she's not even using moral terms yet. She's saying, like I said before, it's good for you to follow the speed limit so that you don't get a ticket. But that has nothing to do with morality. Just like saying it is good for you to make this move in chess that's apt to win, but that has nothing to do with morality. And so this whole concept of negative consequences, that's not even morality. It's just saying, you know, she's using, I guess, good and bad in non-moral terms and non-moral usages. And avoiding a ticket on the speed limit is not the same as a moral ought or a moral duty, you could say.
Well, I like Frank Turk's point that all law legislates morality, because even with something like a speeding ticket, now, of course, to be fair, most of the time it's probably just to collect money and so on. If you go like 2 miles above the speed limit, past the 5 limit mark, you could say. But there is a moral principle behind that. You're to go the speed limit, which is the limit determined so that an accident doesn't happen based on, you know, the road and traffic and so on, however they want to calculate that. It's to avoid getting people hurt or causing accidents that could kill people. And no matter what law they give you, there's some moral principle. So there is an ought behind it almost. And
I mean,
not because of negative consequences. I'm not saying you were saying that, but right. Now I remember the point of my analogy with the family hostage situation. There would be negative consequences of doing the right thing. So that wouldn't determine something to be morally right just because there are negative consequences.
Exactly.
So let's let her finish out and see if there's anything else. Were you going to say something before?
Nope.
Especially when there are cops around, to avoid tickets. And also, we still don't hit our sister for having stolen our daddy. We sue her instead.
Number 3. But Isaac Newton.
Can you pause it?
Huh?
I just want to say, you can sum up her whole entire point there, her points there with morality is just, she thinks morality is just cause and effect. That's all she's saying.
Yeah, it just seemed to be a description.
Right. If I stab someone,
may have come about, but or how we know morality, I guess. Right.
If I stab someone, that's going to cause them pain, and so the effect is pain. Therefore, she then says, "Oh, we shouldn't stab people because it causes people pain, and it doesn't allow us to work together as a team." All it is cause and effect. But you see the philosophical problems with that. We don't need to get into that, but I'm just saying it's pretty much just cause and effect is what she thinks morality is based upon.
Yeah, it doesn't support atheism or theism. It's just a description of what we see.
Exactly.
there's no ought, I guess. There,
Nope,
there
not
was
at
no, there definitely was no proving an ought there, but it's almost like Sam Harris's thing almost. But let's go ahead and continue. Oh, before we start this one, I'm not going to. Deflating Atheism already made a great video response to this, and so I'm not going to waste my time since there's already a better video. He basically, I'll just let the whole thing play and give my thoughts. And maybe I'll link his response, but if you want to go see his full response, it's like 5 minutes or something like that. But
Any scientist or religious smart person here believed in God? So the news got back to you, probably from your pastor or some other religious teacher, that Isaac Newton believed in God. So did Darwin. Maybe they even said Albert Einstein. So isn't an atheist assuming themselves smarter than all of those people when they claim that it is unreasonable or illogical to believe in God? No. Let's talk about Isaac Newton. That's the one I hear the most. Isaac Newton was born in the 1600s and was born into a religious family. It's no strange thing that people often end up the religion of their family. One of the reasons he held on to his belief in God is what he considered the grandeur of creation. But he also lived before the Darwin days, before biology became what it is today, and before he understood that all of this thing that seemed amazing can actually be explained by perfectly natural means. And most of these men that people point to as, look, they were brilliant religious people, they usually lived in times where it wasn't okay to be non-religious, and certainly not an atheist. Think of all the many people who have been put to death.
let me tell you a time where it wasn't okay to be religious.
Yeah.
Ever hear of? I'm not even going to go to the 20th century, but rather the French Revolution and the cult of reason. These were completely anti-religious people who overthrew France and burned many religious books as well. And this was almost the same time period. It's a little after, I think, Isaac Newton, but you can't say, generally speaking, there was never. There's always. It was always okay to be religious, but never non-religious. It's vice versa with the French Revolution. And especially with their definition of atheism, if they want to call us all atheists, then all atheism is responsible for all crusades and so on. But besides that point, I agree.
That's so funny, dude.
Yeah, it's literally they was say we are atheists towards all the other gods. Therefore, I just believe one less god than you. Literally, atheism is responsible for every act ever. And black holes are atheists, so when they rip apart solar systems and so on, their atheists are responsible for that.
Dude, this is, oh my gosh, dude. I'm sorry, hold on, give me a second. This is hilarious. Oh, it's just so stupid. Oh my gosh, that is so good. All right,
okay, let's just let him finish his point.
For heresy, for positing scientific hypotheses that later were fleshed out and turned out.
Aristotle was not a flat earther, so he's talking about the flat Earth conspiracy. So, yeah, Aristotle was around the 4th century on the top of my head. He proposed a spherical model. Of course, his cosmology wasn't the best.
Nobody's
what's his theology? He was closer than most of the people in his day, but especially with the shape of the Earth, he was closer than a lot of people. And then these claims of science didn't come around until the most scientific hypotheses didn't come around until the 17th century and so on. The atomizers literally posited that things are a composite of smaller things, and that's where we get the word atom from.
Yeah.
The Greeks were brilliant people, and they were theists too, and they held to the teleological view where all things are headed towards an end, which almost has Christian implications. And Plato definitely seemed to imply that there was one first cause almost. But just looking at Athens and the Greeks and so on refute half these claims.
Well, all this is just ignorant and naive. I mean, we all stand we stand on the backs of giants, and that's just a fact about it. And basically what's happening here is okay, we get, we're going through the timeline of history, and then we get to the 17th century, and then we go, okay, we don't need you guys that got us to this point anymore. That's pretty much what's happening. We say, okay, see you guys, we're done with you. We're going to move on, and we're going to move on with this science, right? We didn't get any of that without these people in the past. So I think it's very naive and ignorant to say that it's almost showing that to be irrelevant. Well, they believed in some weird cosmology, or they did alchemy, or they believed the Earth was flat and stuff, and then it's just like, okay, it's like, why is Isaac Newton still referred to as the father of physics? Why is Principia Mathematica, one of the greatest written works in physics ever created still, even though Isaac Newton had some fringe views.
Or calculus by, Leibniz.
Exactly. It's just naive and ignorant.
Or literally logic, because Aristotle, he didn't develop the laws of logic. You could say he sort of discovered them and pointed them out to people. And then without Christian philosopher Boethius to translate the earliest documents he had, we wouldn't have his textbooks and texts on logic. And without Christians, you won't have logic. And logically, without logic, you can't have science. So thank Christians for science. So
right.
Okay, let's see what else he has to say. Even
to be true. Not to mention the religious beliefs of these people are greatly exaggerated. The claim that Darwin was a staunch atheist but had a deathbed conversion simply made up. Or that Albert Einstein was a theist, which if he was a pantheist. He certainly wasn't a Christian. Unfortunately, there's no time to wait while you Google pantheist. But the next time that you think it's smart to point to Isaac Newton as a very brilliant...
Did you want to say something?
Sorry, what was that sly remark with us having to look up pantheism?
I don't know. Maybe it's again, this would just be a speculation, but perhaps it's an idle condescension that I know pantheism people don't, but I'm not going to claim that's what he's saying. Perhaps it's just a joke because maybe he thinks most people don't know what pantheism is. But
yeah, okay.
But by the way, if they do think that these are arguments most theists and apologists use, then of course they're going to think that people don't know what pantheism is.
Right.
But anyway.
In person, as he undoubtedly was, who believed in God, therefore it is reasonable to believe in that. You might want to remember that Newton also believed in alchemy.
Genetic fallacy.
Yeah.
And ad hominem, literally. Two textbook fallacies there, so
he likely died of mercury poisoning.
That would be a legit genetic fallacy.
Yeah,
because he died from mercury poisoning, his belief in God isn't reasonable. Okay.
Yeah, that is awkward, isn't it? Number 4.
Or is it possible he thought that there was a mover of the heavens in which he developed the laws of classic mechanics, as he put it earlier, before he got into quantics?
Exactly.
We're just theists anyway. Or we're just atheists towards the other 2,999 yards.
I know God lives because I've experienced him.
I know God is real because I've experienced him. While I don't doubt or diminish the importance of anybody's personal experience, as an argument, you have to recognize why this is uncompelling. There are a myriad of things neurologically that could explain the experience that you are attributing to God. To test the efficacy, ask yourself, if I were raised in a different faith, would I have interpreted what I experienced differently? Perhaps gave the
straight epistemology. No, just kidding.
To a different deity.
No, that's a fair question.
Or others who had religious experiences that led them to different faiths, not having an experience that was just as real as mine. Even if you can reconcile all of these questions, your internal experience is only compelling to you. You can't replicate it in anybody else. So bringing it forth as a refutation for those of us who have no faith is completely ineffective.
Number 5.
I would
this is probably the only real one I agree with.
I don't think we should.
Oh, good.
I don't think we should use our experience as hard evidence for
non-believers. I agree with that point.
Yeah.
Now, do we have rational justification for believing it is the witness of the inner witness of the Holy Spirit? I would say yes, because first of all, I think Christianity is true over other religions and is falsifiable because of resurrection. And when they try and point to Islam, there's a whole lot that goes into that with the textual evidence and so on. But with that, if Christianity is true, then obviously you have justification that your experience of worshiping the Christian God, and he actually does indwell with people. Yeah, you have justification for believing that. So I would say people are justified in believing it's the witness of the Holy Spirit and so on. But I agree, and J. Warner Wallace talks about this with his Mormon family members, I believe, that they would literally argue the same thing because of experience. Experience can be why, as I like how Matthew Robertson puts it in here, my experience is relevant for why I believe, but I can't help convince others. Yeah, that's a good summary of it.
Yeah.
So I would agree with Shannon's point, and I would say let's talk about the evidence. But when you actually give some of the atheists evidence, they just like to rely on their own personal experience of what religion has done to them. Apparently, the
Like
shackle
Dan
of
Barker.
religion. But what was that you said?
I said just like Dan Barker. His whole talk at Oxford was about how he was a minister at one point, and he felt all the fuzzy feelings we all felt. And so because he was able to feel all the fuzzy feelings and get out of it, therefore, it's not true because he was able to leave. It's like,
well, literally his one of his arguments against the existence of God is the fact that we argue over it. It's just like, wow. So you're saying because atheists argue that they're unconvinced, therefore God doesn't exist? That is very circular.
yeah.
You're saying I'm justified that I'm not convinced because I'm not convinced.
Exactly.
But you should doubt your intuition or your experience of what you think is convincing anyway. So if you want to be a true skeptic, but of course they're not going to, because if they do, then they would have to be agnostic or something, not atheist. But then again, we're all atheists and so on.
You would believe in God if you just lived his word.
Now, I honestly don't know what it means to live his word. So if this is a cliche Christians use, then I would agree they should stop using it. And this next one is just some atheist experience with his own old Christian faith and so on. Whether he was a Christian or not, I don't know. I'm not going to claim. I mean, I would take his word and say he was one. I think people can fall in a state of disbelief, perhaps, but with how he describes Christianity and how the godless Iowan do it, it sounds like they don't actually believe in mere, or did believe in mere Christianity and just believed in a straw man version of it. But and maybe that's why they're atheists now, because they truly don't understand what Christianity is and what it entails. But
You'd believe in God if you lived his words. I heard that a lot when I decided to leave religion behind. In fact, I remember my mother telling people around me that all of my problems would be solved if I just came back to the kingdom home. I remember hearing PragerU talking about the famed atheist's prayer. God, if you're real, then reveal yourself to me. Problem is that when you say something like that, you're priming your mind to expect a result. You're preparing yourself for confirmation bias.
now this just seems like it makes his position unfalsifiable at this point, because if you're going to say, should I pray to this God that might exist, but whatever I experience is just going to be me expecting that. If you want to use experience or something as a justification for God existing, but that past this would be a contradiction in their own video. It would seem like that they shouldn't rely on experience, but yeah, if they want experience to believe in God, then sorry, you contradict yourself. Unless Shannon Q and Telltale Atheists have different views, then perhaps not. But let's go ahead and finish.
It might seem like an innocent idea. Ask God to reveal himself to you, and if he does, you'll know he's real. But from that moment on, you're expecting something to happen. You're expecting God to reveal himself in some way, and anything or nothing at all will trigger that. If you're looking for real, objective answers, we aren't going to find them by preemptively believing in something that might or might not be there. You can tell me all you want that I was...
Fair enough point. I mean, if that's his point, then sure, I agree. Look at the evidence and so on.
Never a true Christian, or that I have to open my mind and heart to Jesus, or that I would believe in God.
you have to be open-minded, and if you have the hardcore skepticism that most atheists have, from my experience, then they're not open to it, and no matter what you give them, they're just going to be in a state of skepticism because, number one, I think they just have a bias against theists, and that's what I think this video almost shows that, because they categorize these as like all the main theistic arguments, to me at least. But
I don't think that this whole issue is as hard as he's making it out to be. It's like either he reveals himself to or he doesn't. If I say, I'll speak like an atheist for once. If I say, magical invisible unicorn thing, are you real? Please show me. Well, I can do that, right? So I'm not. How am I? I don't know
we'll
how.
Get to Godless cranium in a few minutes.
There. What?
We'll get to Godless cranium in a few minutes. Just wait.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, like I can. Obviously, he thinks God is imaginary, right? So I can come up with any imaginary thing that someone might have believed. I can pray to Horus, right? I can say, Horus, if you're real, please show me. And then I'm either going to get no or a yes, right? I'm either going to, there's going to be some sign or there's going to be no sign. So I don't know how that's preparing you for confirmation bias necessarily. It's either a no or a yes. And if it's a no, then I would say that's not the end of it. Look at the evidence. You could have, there could be so many issues going here. Pride, you haven't humbled yourself. You're too on your soapbox yet. You really aren't sincerely seeking. But I don't think that you're necessarily preparing yourself for confirmation bias. If God is imaginary, then you're going to get an answer of no. So either you only have two options there. Either he's real or he's not. And if he chooses to reveal himself to you, then he will. If he doesn't, then there's your answer. So I think he's making too much of a deal out of this than there really is present.
It sort of seems like the divine hiddenness argument.
Right. Yeah, it's a little
that would be very implicit. But you mentioned Horus. You mean the guy who was born of a virgin, had 12 followers, fed 4,000, 5,000 people, was baptized in the river of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And the Father said, "My beloved Son." He did miracles. He had a Last Supper. He died by crucifixion, even though that didn't exist yet. He rose from the dead, even though what was it? Horus who was his body was ripped apart or something like that, or is that Osiris?
I don't even know.
I don't know if you saw the Vocab Malone clip I uploaded. He talked about good arguments against Christ mythicism, and she was like, I need to do a video on Christ mythicism. I used Everything Biblical's video, who is also theistic logos. I don't know if he wanted me to reveal that or not, but sorry. But he had a pretty good video on the New Testament. Did Jesus exist? And the answer is yes. And if you say no, then you have a heavy burden proof, which I don't think you can show. But dude, I'm just gonna play the rest of this guy and then give closing thoughts on him.
If I lived his words, or whatever other.
Was there anything else you wanted to say?
Nope, we good.
Nonsense you want, but living God's word isn't how we find truth. And if you're genuinely interested,
I would say live God's word because it is the truth. But now if you want to ask me why do I believe that, then that can be where the conversation can go.
Interested in the truth like I am, and like so many others purport to be, then you won't be afraid to face the fact that there's zero evidence for any gods. The moment evidence presents itself, I'll be the first to
Yeah, when atheists make this claim, I hold on, I'll let you respond. But when atheists make this claim, I just ask, what do you think we mean by God? That's not my burden proof. Okay, so there is no evidence for that, which you can't define. Got it. But all your examples of invisible pink unicorns, Bigfoots, those are things we have good definitions for. But yet we know there's no evidence, and in fact, almost evidence against their existence. So you can be, hard atheist towards those things, you can say. But again, and then what would you consider evidence? If you have a definition of God, but yet you don't know what would count as evidence for that hypothesis, then first of all, that's scientifically lazy and illiterate if you want believe in science and so on. So, and then again, there's no evidence for what you don't know what would count as evidence. Got it. Go ahead.
Right. I mean, I get so annoyed when they say that there's no evidence, because it's just an equivocation fallacy. It's like everybody has evidence. The problem is not that there's no evidence. What he means is evidence that is good enough to convince him. Evidence that is evidence is that that would to him be like, I cannot deny this. So he's basically saying good evidence. So he's using the word evidence in two different ways. That's why it's equivocation fallacy. And it's just so annoying because it's like then when you ask them, usually they're just they are advocating for they're subscribing or adopting some view of scientism, either soft or hard scientism. But it's like they put a restriction on it, which is okay. Then what evidence do you want? Empirically verified evidence, and then there you go. Then nothing's really going to convince them, because you cannot put God in a test tube. You can't put God under a microscope. You cannot, do any repeatable experiments on God. So then they're already setting them up for their own conclusion. So
well,
it's like,
I think you're exactly right, because when people use this argument, then you give them a valid and sound syllogism. Just like arguments are evidence. Just
exactly.
like you literally you are that is scientism. That would say that logical arguments, deductive arguments, are not a valid way of truth because it's almost a priori reasoning. You have to go a posteriori reasoning based on empiricism and so on.
Well, I almost want to ask them if they know what the nature of these, even if they know if it's a deductive argument or not. Do they understand what a deductive argument is? Because it's like, if the premises are formally and informally valid, they're true, and the conclusion is more plausible than its denial, then it is an unavoidable the conclusion of what the argument is asserting. That's just the nature of a deductive argument. So you need either to refute the argument, or you need to show that the premises are false, etc. You need to debunk the argument. If you can't, then the argument is just true. It's that's the consequence, is that it's true. So we have a plurality of sound arguments, and it's up to them to show why they're not good evidence, because there's evidence. He's just saying that there's not good evidence in his opinion, and that's annoying. That's just annoying. They need to stop doing that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That's an equivocation fallacy, and that's actually something I just thought of too when you said that. Just because they say there is no evidence, but then they go and then appeal to incredulity, like you just stated. Oh, I'm not convinced, therefore there is no evidence. Or what they're stating, that there is no evidence, they make it seem like there is no objective evidence, but then it's based on their own subjective lack of belief, psychological state of mind, and usually they have a flawed epistemology, and it's just like with your epistemology with Matt Dillahunty, how we were talking before the show, as accused black and white fallacy. And if you go with the information now, but there could be information in the future, and you just want to have this hardcore skepticism, you have to apply that to everything, not just the God concept. So your own existence.
Right.
Now he does believe the laws of logic are objective and prescriptive, so that's more consistent, but okay, onwards.
Meantime, I'll continue fighting extremism at every turn.
Number 6. You do believe in God, you just want to sin.
I used to say this all the time when I was religious. All atheists want to do is sin. The truth of the matter is, though, sin...
I just don't think it's atheists. I think it's just everyone in general wants to sin.
Right.
And I'm for real about that. Sometimes... everyone goes through, like when I go through times of sin, it's almost like, man, do I really want God to exist? Because then I'll be accountable. Those are things in my past and so on, and things I will not get into, but that is just a general principle. So I'm not saying that all atheists who are unconvinced of God's existence are not psychologically in a state of mind where they do believe God exists and they just want an excuse for sinning and so on. But we're getting to what sin is, and then how, because he doesn't, I don't think he understands what sin is at all.
Yeah.
But I'll just let him finish.
Sin itself just seems to be things that you would rather other people not do, or things in a book that you shouldn't do.
baby goats in their mother's milk, anyone? How's that immoral? Surprisingly, though, outside the faith, I found it far easier to live a moral life. I no longer do immoral things and then ask forgiveness, expecting to feel a little bit better after that. I just try not to do anything immoral. I respect those around me, and I try to do the least amount of harm as physically possible. It actually seems like I have an easier time not sinning outside the faith than I ever did inside the walls of faith. Now,
Wait.
pass me another bowl of mama milk.
Hold on, I'll just let him finish. And then...
Thanks, Jimmy. Hope you have a great night.
See, I don't actually dislike that guy. I think what's going on there is I think he actually believes what he's saying. I think he's just naive. I'm gonna cut him some slack because he just doesn't seem to understand certain things. I think if he had some more information, that maybe the timeline of his life from becoming a Christian, going from the faith to an atheist might have not happened. But so ironic.
He brought up the goat milk and so, and I don't give him as much leeway.
Well, I mean, right. I mean, I think he's just, you know, he's drinking the Kool-Aid that they're all doing. But I think what's ironic is that he says that he has a better time not sinning now than when he was attached to religion. I mean, don't you expect that? Don't you expect yourself that if you create your own rules, if you're the creator of your own rules, you live by your own beat, that you're not going to think that you're sinning? Like, that's just a given. Like, I mean, literally the scriptures say that when there was no sin, the law made sin sin. So it's like, obviously you're not going to think that you're sinning if you're just have an arbitrary code you're living by. And
Romans 3, I think.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I just don't want to do things that I consider to be immoral. And that's easy to live by. That's so easy to do. So obviously he's not going to think that he's sinning, right? So I find it ironic that he even said that. I don't think he caught himself there, but that's why I think he's just naive. I think he's just naive. I think he's ignorant. I don't think he really just understands certain things.
Well, yeah, and I don't think he understands the nature of sin. I like Augustine's definition because I think it's his very simple. It's not a simple definition. That's just sarcasm, but I think it's a great definition. And let me go into that. God's vitiatious, culpable act against God's shalomic design. Now you may be thinking, what the heck does that mean? And culpable would imply you're accountable for something. So there is an objective moral facts and so on. And God would have designed for a universe. And Augustine believes also that sin is desiring something beyond its worth. And that's exactly what Matthew 5 goes into with the nature of hating your brother and looking at another woman with lust, loving something, the coveting exactly, I believe, in the Ten Commandments. And loving something beyond its worth disrupts God's peaceful design. That's shalom. I believe that's Hebrew for peace and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Hebrew way of saying peace. And if God has purposes for these designs with objective moral facts behind it, you can say this is more philosophical, and then biblical would be living out, not living in faith almost. But even people of not faith can be moral, of course, because they listen to the moral law written upon their hearts. And in a way, I say they are being faithful because they are believing what God has instilled in them. So in a way, that is believing to understand Anselm's definition of faith. But again, with Augustine's definition of sin, I just love how he says desiring something beyond its worth. And that I think is very helpful. There's other, like, missing the mark. That's, I guess.
What about the rectitude?
Any acts against God's law. It could be a more simpler definition, but philosophically and more in-depth stuff would be Augustine's. Go ahead.
What about the rectitude?
Oh, actually, I'm happy you brought that up because I wanted to bring that up and I forgot. Yeah, rectitude would be a thing's purpose. So in God's design, God's shalomic design, things would have rectitude or having oughtness or orderness, things living according to their purpose. So marriage, for example, the biblical narrative is one man, one woman, and to go against that would be going against the oughtness, the rectitude of that, and that would be an example of sin, I would argue. Of course, I don't isolate the homosexuality as a sin that's somehow far above others. We're all sinners in need of the Savior and so on. That's a whole another topic, but that's how I would break down a sin. And with that example, there's other examples as well. So,
Right.
Yeah. But atheists are responsible for all acts of sin because we're all atheists towards the
Yes.
gods. Okay, last one. You can't prove God doesn't exist.
7. You can't prove God doesn't exist.
You can't prove God doesn't exist. This argument is often spewed out as if it should be convincing, but it's not. They also say it as if it's a 50-50 proposition, as if there is as much reason to believe.
It's only 50-50 if it's unknown. Well, I won't even say you can't. Okay, I correct myself. You can't assign probability if it's unknown. Like it could end up being 99 versus 1 probability or whatever. If it's unknown, then it could be either or. You just don't know the probability since it's unknown.
And it depends on what.
Huh?
It depends on what probability theory you're adopting, either frequentism or Bayesianism.
Yeah, I think
frequentism is not really much held anymore.
I'll tell you, when I practice skepticism is when it's against atheist claims, because someone who's a big proponent of Bayes' theorem is a Richard Carrier, and he tries to apply that to Christ mythicism, and that's where I become skeptical of it. I don't even completely understand it, I'll admit that, but just because it's Richard Carrier, I'm just skeptical.
Richard Carrier doesn't understand Bayes' theorem in the first place. Luke Barnes actually has an extensive article refuting Richard Carrier's ignorance towards Bayes' theorem.
Could you send me that, actually?
Yeah, I'll send it to you. It's really good because he tries to debunk the fine-tuning argument with it as well. And yeah,
I remember that as well. Okay, let's get back into.
There is some invisible, supernatural, often all-knowing, all-powerful super entity out there.
Not quite. He got all-powerful and all-knowing, right? And then some of his other things.
Yeah.
We're not necessarily saying God is invisible, unseeable by the human eye, but eventually Christians will come face to face with the God of the universe. So it's not invisible in that sense, but
there's the thing, it's a construct of the human imagination, especially when you factor into the equation that the entity they're arguing for comes with a flawed holy book that contains multiple contradictions.
Just mere assertion.
This sort of argument for anything else. For example, these same people wouldn't accept my argument that there exists an invisible, lazy-eyed, god-eating pink dragon out there.
Invisible, lazy-eyed, pink dragon even knew you have an image of what this thing would look like.
Right.
Very, even though a dragon by definition is a physical reptilian flying beast that can breathe dragon, very, very invisible. Very invisible. Oh, wait, it's right there. It's not invisible. But anyway, I'm just going to let him finish.
Because they can't prove that it doesn't exist. And for good reason. It's far more reasonable to believe it doesn't exist than to think it does. The same goes for the God concept. Nothing, other than perhaps to say that I'm having a conscious experience right now, can be known for certain. Yet we don't walk around everything.
But why?
We know for certain. Something cannot be and not A and non-A cannot be at the same time, because if so, then everything could be true and false at the same time. So all epistemologies, no matter what you adopt that principle. Even Descartes, I think, therefore I am, because he's assuming that it's the case that I am because I think, and I am because I doubt, and I'm not, and I am not I am, and so on.
Yeah.
And law of identity, he's presupposing he can distinguish between his mind or conscious experience and reality. Well, if you deny the law of identity, like the Hindus do, because pantheism depends on not believing in logic, then you can just be one with reality itself, and there is no separate conscious agent, and so on. And the law of excluded middle and true-false dichotomy, it's either one or the other, not both. So
right.
Those things we know for absolute certain. Now, say if we know those with absolute certain, certainty, then some things, if they're done by a deductive reasoning, by logic, like the ontological argument, or Descartes, I think, therefore I am, we can know with certainty as well. But absolute certainty doesn't imply knowledge anyway. You have warranted. I still hold to knowledge as justified true belief, because I ultimately do believe that if you're knowing agents, then you do believe things, and knowledge would come from that, from what you first believe. You must first believe in order to understand, and that's why I love Anselm's definition of faith, and why Christians should adopt that, because that's how biblical faith works as well. But,
right.
Do you mind if I finish this, and then we can give the finishing thoughts?
Yeah, go ahead.
In fact, the vast majority of people who believe in God don't believe in gods other than their own. Yet Group B often uses the same arguments and bad evidence to argue for their God's existence as Group A. Bottom line is that there really isn't any good,
if you can name those arguments,
of a God. At least not that I've run across so far, and that's enough for me. Thank you very much, Mr. Atheist, for allowing me to take part in your video. Cheers.
Thank you all so much for watching. We will skip the secret link of the day, because today you have links to all 6 channels that help collaborate on this. Please.
Okay, yeah, the same arguments can work for, other religions, even though pantheism, if the Kalam cosmological argument is true, naturalistic pantheism is falsified because it's eternal.
Exactly. Well, my problem with that last response was he said, you see, it's just much more reasonable to believe that this thing doesn't exist, but he doesn't explain why. It's like, why is it? I mean, I agree with him that it's not reasonable to believe in that random thing he made up, but the question is, like, why is it not reasonable to believe in that thing over another thing? And reasonable would be more of a easier way to say it, but what's more plausible? Is it more plausible that this thing doesn't exist, or it does? And how can we evaluate that? Like, for example, one way you could go about showing that, God couldn't exist is by showing that it's, logically contradictory, it's incoherent, etc., and things like that. You could do it the same way, but he doesn't explain. He just says that it's just not reasonable. And I don't know if I'm being nitpicky or not, but I don't like the fact that he didn't give any reason. Like, what's the rationale behind not believing?
Like he could try and use the reason. Well, there's not enough time in this video, but certainly you can at least take 10 seconds to give an example for someone to look up real quick to see if your point is valid or not.
Right.
Especially if it's not, like a live stream and someone asks you, can you give me an example? And they sort of back you into a corner and you're running out of time, maybe in a debate or something, or, I need more time to think about that. Rather, you're doing this video ahead of time and you can prepare for it more better, so you could give an example easily in your script. But, we're just atheists towards other billions, cajillions, chevaliloo.
Just, Yeah, an actual infinite.
Yeah, an actual infinite of gods. Actually, that just gave me a great idea for a video responding to I'm going to make that new video, but people will see that eventually now. But any closing remarks about 7 things theists say?
Yeah, I think that some of these are warranted, but I believe that a lot of the responses we heard were kind of went on to little tangents and rants that were very riddled with problems philosophically and epistemologically. The only person I really agreed with was Shannon Q, because I mean, some of these things is actually going to be in my video, except I'm going to explain them in a way that's, don't want to sound arrogant here, but that's far better.
If God is all powerful, then why does he need explaining, huh?
Right, yeah, just there's tons. So I mean, I feel like the video, as we'd expect, riddled with problems, philosophical problems, epistemological problems, and the motive behind it, I think, is pretty much disingenuous with how it comes off. So
yeah, again, I don't know whether they actually know arguments, and maybe they do have a motive to sin. I'm not saying they do. Or perhaps they just have horrible research skills. And just argue from their own understanding. Oh, yeah, Gallus Cranium said towards the end, it's good enough for me. Do you remember how he said that? Based on what I haven't seen, or based on what I have seen so far,
Yeah.
enough for me that there is no evidence for God. Wow. For
Yeah.
so-called skeptics, I sort of use the same phrase in my Matt Dillahunty video I recently did. For a so-called skeptic, you should be skeptical. It could easily be the case that there's evidence for God that you just haven't looked out for. That I'm not appealing to evidence. Evidence of absence doesn't mean absence of evidence. I'm saying now, if you haven't researched as much as you possibly can, especially since you make a living off this godless cranium, and I think his channel did recently get demonetized. So, but if you're going to make a living off this, certainly you can go beyond more. Oh, that's just good enough for me. Especially if you want to have understanding, and that implies wisdom. And to be a lover of wisdom is to be a lover of truth. And if you seriously want to seek the truth, you should have a better way of epistemology instead of that's good enough for me. But
right. And I think that oftentimes a lot of these internet personas that we come across, I don't think they do, as like you said, they might have horrible research skills. I don't think they read the literature as much as the theists do. For example, the book Blackwell Companion to Natural Theology, which contains, I think, 10 or 11 arguments for God's existence. Arguments for miracles, consciousness, reason, evil, cosmological, etc. It's like, I'm not saying that you need to read every book under the sun, but it's like, if you haven't dealt with that literature, with the sophisticated academic papers and written on these things, then I don't really think that you have much of a platform to stand on when you're talking about, this is, I just haven't been convinced, and I don't know if there's any arguments out there. Well, it's like it's very easy to find the work being done on these things by the experts, and so I don't think a lot of these times people are even reading the theistic literature. I think they're saying they just are in one giant echo chamber, and then they were just regurgitating what they're hearing. And that's enough for them to, then confirmation bias kicks in and they're good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you're right. But I mean, you brought up the Blackwell Companion to Natural Theology book. That's an atheist book. They're atheist towards the 2,999 other gods. So
yeah, and now weird paradoxes start manifesting, and it's just
okay. Anything you want to plug?
Just follow my channel and add my social media on there too. So that's it.
I think you need to add in your Twitter to your links in your channel description.
What?
Like when I go to your channel, I just see my website, Christian Truth Through Apologetics. Since you are part of that, you may want to add Twitter as a direct link there, so people.
Oh, right. Yeah, I haven't put some. Okay, yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah. But oh yeah, so I think we responded sufficiently to all these arguments, or responses to 7 things theists say. I think the video should be renamed to 7 things that some theists say which are just stupid, and which would be fine almost, because some of the claims in there I agree are not the best arguments, and in a way are stupid. Yeah. But yet, I think their own arguments against the arguments they're arguing against, they didn't even successfully debunk them. But like a godless cranium did. I don't think godless cranium debunked. You can't prove God doesn't exist. That will.
Right. No, I don't. I think, yeah.
Okay, I'm done. It's 12 o'clock where I'm at. So thank you for watching, everyone. We're almost to 1,000, so definitely please leave a like, share, and share this video with someone who may not come across Christian apologetics content or needs this type of content. Maybe not this video specifically, but any of my other apologetic videos. And just subscribe.
Awesome.
And there's also a Patreon link if you want to support the channel. That comes with some benefits depending on the tier you choose to support. And thank you for watching. Christian truth needs to be spread through apologetics, and God bless. Any last remarks from you?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. Then thanks for watching.